A lot of what Robin said certainly applies to the State Library of New South Wales experience as well. I might tell you a bit initially about our collections and what we're doing with our collections to make them accessible in the 21st century. It was right at the end of the war in 1918 that the trustees of the Mitchell Library began this extraordinary European War collecting project. That's what the war was then referred to as, the European War. And the principal librarian, Ifold, actively sought out diaries and correspondence and related material from servicemen. He sought and accepted quality accounts, detailed accounts from the men, mostly men, one nurse in the collection. He preferred not to take memoirs that were being written after the war by returned servicemen, but he wanted the original diaries and letters written at the time. Ifold recognised the importance of these private accounts. He knew that the official war history was going to be written after the war, and the official dispatches and so forth were due to go to the yet-to-be created National War Museum. So he really took advantage of the Mitchell Library being there, being a very major institution at the time, to acquire a lot of significant material immediately after the war. He was keen to obtain material which expressed the personal feelings, doings and relationships of the men, their thoughts and actions. And the library actually advertised for material and stressed that the original material was wanted, not copies, which is a bit different to the War Memorial, which were to be deposited into the Mitchell. This is the lovely Mr. Ifold. He advertised in major Australian newspapers as well as a number of English newspapers, particularly aimed at catching the eye of servicemen as they were returning from Europe. His tagline was, "Good prices will be paid for good material." And he was true to his word. There are many examples of correspondence in the library's collection sent by Ifold and the Mitchell librarian Hugh White back to servicemen or their families saying, "I'm sorry, this material is not up to standard. We will not accept them into the collection," which is pretty dire. We would never say that now, of course, to return servicemen. Ifold's advertisements that he published, he was equating that these diaries were going to be very significant to Australians of the future, and he equated them with some of the other very historic manuscripts we already held in the collection, including Cook material, Flinders material, those collections of the great explorers like Sturt, Burke and Wills, and statesmen such as Wentworth and Parkes. He was putting the diaries written by the average serviceman from World War I on the same level as those great names in colonial Australia. He regarded the diaries as important sources for Australian students to access. His intention was that these items would be preserved and accessed for the generations to come, and this is of course an important point that I'll come back to. This is a curated collection, as I said. Library staff were selective in their acquisitions and purchased material which complied with agreed criteria. As I said, he was keen to acquire material which really talked about what they were doing, their fears and their feelings. When you look at the material, they don't exactly talk about the detailed accounts of a battle, but they do describe what it was like preparing for a battle, what it was like to be in the middle of a barrage, the work of stretcher bearers rescuing wounded from no man's land. We have a number of diarists who, they all mention friends and acquaintances that they're meeting behind the lines. And these accounts, acquired soon after the end of the war, take in all theatres of war where Australians served. There's accounts from the early conflict in New Guinea in September 1914, accounts from men who served in the Navy, men who served in the fledgling Air Force, the Australian Flying Corps. We've got accounts from chaplains and medical support staff, and of course, as I said, nurses. The diaries do follow a familiar pattern of a civilian becoming a military person. They describe what it's like on the troop ships, leaving home, leaving from Albany, arriving in Egypt, what it's like being a tourist in Cairo, and then of course they hit Gallipoli and then the Western Front. The library purchased, as part of this initial collecting drive, around 240 collections of diaries. during this drive. So the drive went from 1918 through to about 1925 or so. And with each purchase, the library's correspondence revealed that individual letters of acknowledgement were sent back to the servicemen or the families. In many instances, Ifold and his staff acknowledged that along with purchasing the collection, the library was also purchasing the copyright of the material. So I've actually put two examples of those letters up on the screen. So we've been arguing in the last couple of years as we've begun our digitisation process that at least, half of our collection we prepared to argue that we did buy the copyright at the time of purchase. And in fact, this European War Collecting project has recently been added to the UNESCO Memory of the World Register, and we're very excited to have the ceremony for this early in March at the library. So, of course, over the years since 1925, the library has continued to receive via donation family papers, which have often included World War I diaries, and families today do continue to offer their collections to us. And this is where we fall into line, I guess, with the Australian War Memorial in dealing with material via donation. And here, of course, as Robin said, the copyright ownership of these donations resides with the authors and their heirs and descendants. So now we have around 550 collections of World War I material. And for around 100 years, these diaries have remained in stack. Some were microfilmed and made available to researchers in our reading rooms. However, it wasn't until around 7 years ago that the library began to transcribe these diaries using the skills and enthusiasms of our volunteers. And when the transcriptions began to be produced and we began to read about the voices from 100 years ago, we realised, we realised what a significant collection this was. And we knew we were particularly coming up to the 100-year commemoration of World War I, and we knew that we really wanted to get this material out to a wider audience. And we knew that that would be, of course, of great interest to researchers and the Australian public. The library, 100 years on, we wanted to continue Ifold's legacy with this significant collection and make these diaries accessible to a new generation of students, researchers, the general public. Back in 2012, the library received funding from the New South Wales State Government to digitise our significant collections, and the World War I material was one of the first to be digitised, again, looking towards 2014 and 15 and the commemoration. So during 2013 and 14, most of this material was digitised and made available via our catalogue records. Once a volunteer had completed a transcription, this was also linked to the catalogue record. So I've got a lovely catalogue record there for you to enjoy. It's a diary collection for Archie Barwick. And as you can see, the record is there. We've put the image, the digitised images you look at there, and also you can click to read the whole transcript. So for us, this was a good step in terms of access. However, it required that researchers and the public still had to go into our manuscripts catalogue, search and find a particular diarist, and drill down to locate the digitised pages and transcription. If a researcher was particularly interested in one part of the war, for example, a place name, Gallipoli, Fromelles, or a particular topic, food, medical experiences or emotions, they had to search within each transcript. We wanted to be able to search across all of our transcriptions, to be able to see relationships and patterns, reoccurring emotions, mentions of locations or people's names. Therefore, we built a transcription tool which allows this searching across all of the diary collection. This transcription tool allows search, but it's also been created so that the remaining diary and letter collections not yet transcribed can be completed by the transcriber community, a crowdsourcing project similar to the Trove Newspapers project. So this is a screen dump of our transcription page from our World War I sub-site. Currently, we have 2 transcription projects going, the World War I diaries and letters, and also our Indigenous Languages project, which is transcribing various documents of Aboriginal word lists and languages. So when you go into the transcription tool to search, I've just done a keyword search on London because I'm particularly interested in looking at what the soldiers, the servicemen and women did when they were on leave in London. So you type in, it's a very basic search, then you see the results of all of the diarists that the transcriptions are loaded up who talk about London. And that's then clicking into one example of one diary. So you get an image of the diary page which you can move around in and view, and then you've got the transcript next to it. This is a screenshot of our page relating to copyright. I'm not sure if you can read that first sort of paragraph, but we're talking about that we want to release this material again in the spirit of IFOLD, wanting to continue IFOLD's legacy to make these collections available and accessible to 21st century audiences. We believe we can make a case that for the core collection, our core collection of diaries were purchased after the war. And we're utilising 200AB of the Act to cover the digitisation of the remaining collections received via donations since the 1930s. Prior to the collections being released on our World War I website, we did publish a list, very similar to what Robin and the War Memorial are doing. We published a list of all of our diarists online and promoted this through media. That was November 2013, trying to locate descendants of our servicemen and nurses. Over a period of 6 months, we received, 10 to 15 responses from family members. In all cases, they provided additional information about the person, and they also could add scanned images, scanned photographs or additional information to our website. We certainly received no negative comments or concerns about the digitisation project, and it was fantastic to meet some of the descendants, and some of them have even been involved with media events and promotions, talking about our collections and the exhibition that we had last year. We do have a takedown policy, which is included on that page as well, if there is any contention with an identified copyright holder. However, we have not had to do this yet, or hopefully ever. It's really important, as Robin was saying, to get this material out there, particularly orphan works, so that perhaps descendants can come forward who will be able to add value or information to our collections and make the connections with family. We have also established a partnership with News Corp Australia that was announced in April 2014, where the two organisations will work together to bring out stories from the collection. News Corp have been collaborating with the library to publish stories of Australian servicemen and women under the title 100 Years of Untold Stories, ANZAC to Afghanistan. And they've been accessing some of our World War I collections to tell the stories from 100 years ago. And also they want to connect with contemporary servicemen and women also to tell their stories. This is one of the first stories they had up online when they launched last year, the diaries for Henry Joseph Parsons. His collections are in our library, and they just have taken excerpts from his diary volumes and displayed them by chapters online. So that's just sort of examples on the pages of what they look like. We were, of course, able to contact descendants of Parsons, and they attended the launch as well, and they were interviewed for the stories, and they were delighted to be involved and to have his diaries published online. This is our World War I sub-site, which you can get to from our homepage, where people can see the list of diarists. You can read stories taken from the collection. You can access the transcription tool, both the search feature, and also you can sign up and help to transcribe the remaining ones if you like. That's curiously addictive. This is just one of the pages of the stories from our collections, just very brief little curated stories and highlights. And the library is encouraging the use of these World War I collections to create new ways of looking at and thinking about the First World War and its legacy. And all of this material can be downloaded for research and study. And we, like a number of cultural institutions worldwide, are making our content available via APIs for researchers to access and use in a variety of ways. The library is providing open access to our data and collections for reuse and redistribution through a selection of data sets and tools. So we've released some data for World War I posters that we have, World War I maps, our Crown Street portraits, and also a collection of hand-coloured photographs taken throughout the whole of World War I. So we encourage the creative use and innovative repurposing of this material. We aim to have the whole collection of World War I diaries and letters available to access and use once all of the transcriptions have been completed and searchable, not just the diary collections that were purchased as part of that initial project. Which means that around half our collection does remain orphan works, where we are taking a risk management approach by digitising and making available. As I said, we published the list of names prior to going live, and it fleshed out one descendant in particular, this lovely man, Trevor Anderson. He had no idea that we had his great uncle's collection of papers in our collection, Hector Brewer, and it was only when he received an email via his local public library, and they were promoting our project, and he happened to look at the list of diarists and found Hector's name there, and he's really embraced the collection, and he was there at the launch and delights in telling the story about his relationship with his great uncle, and has been really amazed by the power of reading his uncle's experiences during World War I. And finally, this is yet another example of us connecting with descendants. This is a lovely lady called Judy Barwick, and she's actually the daughter of World War I soldier Archie Barwick. Archie sold his collection of 16 volumes of diaries to the library in 1922, and Judy remembers as a child, I think in the 50s, actually visiting the library with her father to look at the collection. And in 2013, an edited version of his diaries were published with the title In Great Spirits, and this photo was taken at the launch. It was a wonderful opportunity to meet the larger family, to hear about Archie's life in peacetime. We're keen to engage with a diverse audience with our collection. We're working in collaboration with organisations such as the Australian Theatre for Young People to commission a script based on some of our diaries. This script has been written and performed. The play is called A Town Called War Boy, and that will be performed this year in March and April in Sydney. We're also going to be promoting the collection during the Sydney Writers' Festival in a project called Letters Home, encouraging writers to compose letters in response to the letters written by soldiers and nurses writing at the front. We're also going to be sharing our World War I data as part of the GovHack project this year from the 3rd to 5th of July, where our digital content will be made available to hackers and developers to create new products, interpretations and designs that we have never thought of. Again, we're making our collections available to 21st century researchers, to the public, and continuing the legacy that iFold established 100 years ago. Thank you.